Hello and welcome to Midwest Writers Room. Our mission is to encourage, educate, and celebrate writers of the Midwest. I'm Luella Schmidt.
And I'm Ken Humphrey. Today's chapter break episode features Deborah Hall and her latest publication, What the Current Cannot Swallow, which came out in November 2025.
Debra Hall is a Racine poet whose work explores the intersection of love, loss, and the sacred ordinary. She just published her debut chapbook, What the Current Cannot Swallow. She serves as the current president of the Kenosha Racine Poet Laureate Program, and she was Racine Poet Laureate from 2020 to 2022. Her poems have appeared in Bramble Literary Magazine, Wisconsin Poets Calendar, A Wreath of Golden Laurels by Local Gems Press, and Moss Piglet.
Moss Piglet is such a great name.
It is.
So let's take a look at the synopsis of her chapbook. Deborah Hall and her husband were on a dream trip in Rome when a medical emergency changed everything. Brain surgery, navigating a foreign healthcare system in a language not their own, and a dire 6-month prognosis. The crisis that followed would test their 35-year marriage. In this intimate chapbook, ancient gods and Catholic icons become unexpected companions through illness and loss. Paul traces her journey from crisis through grief to hard-won transcendence, finding that even in the currents pulled towards despair, moments of grace remain.
Mm. Deborah Hall, welcome to Midwest Writers Room. We're so honored and lucky to have you with us. How are you?
I am good. How are you, Luella and Ken?
Doing good.
We're looking forward to jumping into this, especially since April is Poetry Month. So we do a lot
Yes.
of episodes that focus on poets. And as we discussed in the pre-show, neither Luella and I delve into poetry. With Luella, it might be by choice. With me, it's just forced because I have absolutely no ability to construct poems, although I do appreciate them. So before we talk about your book, Deborah, let's just talk a little bit about you. This is your debut chapbook. What is your origin story from writing? Did you always read poetry growing up, or did you have different genres?
My grandma had my first poem when I was 10. It was a very short poem. It was on her refrigerator as long as she had her own apartment or house. So I started when I was 10. So that's about 55 years of writing. So I just see the world through metaphors. I think it has been something that has been very helpful in understanding the world around us.
So you've been writing poetry then for most of your adult life. Do you have writing in your background from either educational or career perspective?
My undergraduate is in Spanish, which has some language. But then my graduate, I did health communication at UWM, and there was a class I took on rhetoric and argumentation and doing metaphors to understand popular or very famous speeches was something that I was like, can I get a job doing this? And the professor said, well, you can write speeches for people. And so that was kind of where it got really cemented. I think I was in my early 40s. So
Very, very cool. So it's in your bio that you were a poet laureate at some point and still still play a role with the Racine poet scene. Can talk us through a little bit about the poet laureate role? I mean, really, what for the 2 years when you were Racine's poet laureate, what was your focus?
well, as a poet laureate, you are the ambassador for Racine for poetry. So you do a lot of events. I was poet laureate during COVID, so they extended our term for a year, both the Kenosha poet laureate and I. So we did a lot of Zoom poetry, and as well as we had to do a project. So I was at a high school. I was teaching Spanish in Racine, and I started a little poetry group with the with my students because that was the group I could get a hold of during COVID. So then we did something online where I invited all the schools. There's 15 high schools in Racine County to do a poetry lesson plan. I created a lesson plan for them, and then if they wanted to submit their poetry. So it was working through a big challenge of COVID and that interaction live that was a big barrier for my project. But we pushed it through in a different way. So it was good. It was great.
Yeah, disruptive time for all of our lives. So, are there poet
Yes.
laureates for each county or city? I guess I'm not clear on how they are created, essentially determined where poet laureates should be?
So there are about 15 poet laureates. It is whatever's community, city, county, that can, have a board to help select every 2 years to do the bylaws, administer the program. And every year there's three more. I think there's a new one in Wausau and somewhere else up north, and a small little village has their own for like 15 years. So I think it's Amory. It's way up north. So
Interesting. So it's kind of more like a grassroots effort if you have a community that wants to have a poet laureate, as opposed to some sort of governing body that says, here's how many we have. Correct?
yes, the Wisconsin Poet Laureate is through the Wisconsin Commission, and I think they're aligned with the Wisconsin Academy in Madison. So there is a statewide project, and I have recently reached out to the Wisconsin Arts Board to say, can we do something structurally across all the cities so that there can be some kind of organizational tool? Because to do this grassroots, we had John Bloner, who started the Poet Laureate for us in Kenosha and Racine in 2011. Otherwise, it's very hard without someone who shepherds and is a champion for the program to make it happen. So now,
Makes
as the
sense.
president, it looks very different. We're having poetry readings and developing partnerships in the community because we're coming up to selecting a new poet laureate for Kenosha and Racine. In We'll be doing that in December this year. So
So I would like to ask a little bit more about writing the poetry and putting together this chapbook. But before I do that, I kind of wanted to go back to the Poet Laureate program itself. I'm curious. My understanding is like part of this position is you're putting poetry into schools and libraries and even places like correctional facilities. And I'm just
yes.
curious if you have in your experience, like what happens? What happens when we put poetry? How does that land? Do you have any stories that you'd want to share, particularly of what happens when someone who maybe didn't experience it before all of a sudden has some of that in their life?
Well, our current Racine Poet Laureate, Mary Skillings, she has been working with students. She experienced the loss of her mother, which was profound, and she found that that was a very good way of developing really engaged relationships with students. So she is bringing that kind of grief as a process to help heal to students. So we're planning to we're going to go down to Lake Michigan and have one of those lanterns that you light on fire, and it lifts, and it has all the names of the people who the students have lost. I think that was a part of the project. So
Yeah. That's incredible. Going back to your chapbook, then, it seems to be at least in part about resilience and finding resilience after kind of great loss. And I'm wondering if you have anything you can share with our listeners about how that process works for you as the poet. Like does an experience have to age for a bit before you could put it on the page? Do you put it on the page in the midst of it? Is it somewhere in the middle? How do you make it come to life?
that is a great question, Luella. I think that it's been 8 years since it happened. It's coming up 8 years next week since my husband passed away. So I think it was a combination of both. I put it to paper right away. I laid on top of my way of seeing the world. So I developed some storylines and then went to New Mexico. There was a writing conference. It was an intensive. So it was 4 days of just writing, writing, writing. And it brought the story in a different way. It squeezed out the grief that might have been sentimental or cliche and made it into a poetic piece. And then it was another 4 months of bringing that back out after that really powerful writing conference that I did last summer. And then it was by happenstance, I found a publisher. So it kind of all came together.
We always love it when we hear that story. It's not always the case. Can you tell us a little bit about the title and why you chose it?
Well, there was 6 titles, so it started out maybe a little bit more grief. It was wrapped up in grief, and then it became this metaphor for something that the river can't drown you and the current can't take from you. The pieces of yourself that remain after the a big flood. And I think it was under under for piece of the metaphor, the undercurrent, what the current can't swallow. At first, it was something I was angry. I was in Rome, and uh, priest had given me a rosary. Uh, there was he was going into surgery, and it's very Catholic in Rome, so the priest came to give him the anointment of the sick, and he refused to confess. So it was, and from that, I had this epiphany, like, well, I can't change this outcome. So I went to the Tiber River and I threw that rosary in there, and that was the first thing that I was like, well, maybe the current can't swallow this, because I was so angry when that first happened, and I was stuck in a foreign country with a probability that we wouldn't go home if he had complications from this very serious brain surgery. So.
Ken has heard me say this before, but I just want to say I feel like one of the magic things that writers do is they take, especially poets, but all writers, they take whatever they are going through and somehow turn it into not only a gift to themselves as processing, but then a gift for the world to help them process. And I admire that. I admire that very much, Deborah. Well done.
Well, thank you. It wasn't an easy way to process it because I had to live with memories that probably weren't very healthy to live with, but it created some kind of tension and some kind of voice and message. So
Yeah.
after the grief was all wrung out of it, there was a good story in there.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have you do a reading, but maybe before we jump into that, do you want to share a little bit more about how this book came to publication, like your process for bringing it to the public?
So I was poet laureate, and I thought, well, maybe I can finish my chapbook. Well, that didn't happen. And then I had to get my teacher license. So I was relearning Spanish. I had too much probably going on at the time. So I finally retired last June and got the book finished in about 3 months because I could just say, okay, I'm going to give it 5 hours a day, every day. It's going to take what it's going to take. So I was on the 6th title, like I said. I just had changed the title, and I was in an author's publish. There was a poetry, I think it was for a whole month. You wrote every day and put it out on Zoom because it was international. And I met another poet, and she said, I just got something published uh, from this Right Where We Belong press in Canada. And I asked her about it. We talked about it, and she said, "Can I see some of your poems?" And she had looked at my things online that I posted online, and she said, "I think my publisher would like your stuff." And I sent it to her, and it was within 3 days I had a contract, so it was good.
Wonderful, wonderful. Good for
Yes.
you.
Yes, it was a very, very good story after all those years of not being able to bring it together or to give it the perspective, a little bit different perspective that time gave it.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, whenever you're ready, go ahead and read some of your poetry for our listeners, and you're welcome to share, any sort of orientation you want to, or whatever makes sense for you.
So my first poem is entitled Bear Bells. It is about the relationship itself. So it gives a good grounding to what the relationship was. Bear Bells. It's midnight in a tent in the mountains of Montana as we backpack, sleep in wild places, smell like trees. Yesterday, I bought bear bells to wear on trails. Hikers say it prevents surprise. Let large animals know I'm here. My ears tune to wind. Night animals awaken. A pine tree brushes the side of the tent. Then cooking gear rattles with a snort, then a growl. You wrestle your sleeping bag open, scramble for glasses, stumble out. I follow your underwear with my flashlight, spot a raccoon just beyond the tent. He suckles peanut butter from a squeeze tube beneath the tree where we hung our food. A rucksack suspended in high branches. The raccoon sniffs the air, gauges your intent. You lunge with a stick and he lumbers away. I try to remember why I agreed to a trip more rugged than romantic, yet saw a chance to map your wilderness, find a branch that holds the things you guard under tooth and claw. Then wait until dark, untie the knots that bind your secrets, listen for them to drop, and hungrily explore you. The second poem is entitled Well-Meaning Advice. The social worker said you can survive a season of pain, but don't decide to sell your house or change jobs or remarry, because every part of your life will scatter as dust, and you have to let the pieces settle. I wondered if it was like famine, if dreams would carry me to the kitchen to chew crusty brown bread with a smear of soft butter. Would I grit my teeth? Recall a time when lunch was in the refrigerator? Maybe I misunderstood the pieces that would need to settle. But what force will scatter my life as dust? And when I reach the end of the world, will there be dragons? At the moment of death, my love looked like he was holding his breath. So I climbed on his chest, shook his shoulders, begged him to inhale. I felt my toes curl around the side of the bed. A life disappearing, like water moves from sink to drain, then exits down a dark pipe. The social worker had confused the order of magnitude, prepared me for the aftershock and not for the blast. The last poem is entitled Turkey Trot. Between my eyebrows and ears, there is a felt turkey hat. Between an orange tutu and black leggings, there is a soft sound of swish. Between stretches, my thighs move strong and fluid. Between now and noon, my son and daughter are here before they leave for their other Thanksgivings. Between the blood pounding in my head and feet, endorphins start to flow. Between breaths, I linger and grief behind. And somewhere between the bridge and finish line, my son and daughter wait so we can complete the race together.
Holy cow. All right. So you don't see this, Deborah, when you're reading, but Luella and I will communicate on the template that we use for this episode. Like we'll type to it back and forth. So this phrase, this strain, confuse the order of magnitude, prepare me for the aftershock, not for the blast. Love that. I love that. So good.
I really, that was so incredible. Like everybody understands what that means. I highlighted it, and then Ken is on the page going, I love this. So,
oh, thank you. That was the very last poem I finished the day before I met Maggie, who I mean, it was the ink was wet when I finished it because I did not want to go there, but I was ready. I was ready to look at it different, to cross that space that really talks about that moment of death.
Oh, my goodness. It was really stunning. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Tell our listeners where they can find more about you, where they can find your book.
My book is available online through Amazon, either through searching through Debra Hall or through What the Current Cannot Swallow, or it is available in the 2 independent bookstores in Racine, Vintage and Modern, as well as Arnett and Sons. And it's also available at the Mocha Lisa coffee shop on the north side of Racine.
All right, and we will throw the links in there for that. So this book is out now roughly about 6 months or so. Any appearances or book signings coming up for you?
I did a local book signing at coffee shops and the bookstores. I have a reading on Saturday with other poets at Vintage and Modern Books. And I'm going to be spreading out and traveling I'm going to go to Madison and some places in Illinois, as well as Minnesota. Stores will carry it.
All right, very good. Well, I want to take this moment now to thank Debra for coming on, introducing everybody to What the Current Cannot Swallow. Thanks to all of you out there for hanging out with us in the Midwest Writers Room. I'm Ken Humphrey.
And I'm Luella Schmidt. Words ignite imaginations and spark change. Never underestimate the power of storytelling.
Midwest Writers Room is a production of the Wisconsin Writers Association. Writing and editing by Luella Schmidt and Ken Humphrey. Sound design and editing by Ken Humphrey. Music for the Midwest Writers Room was written by Michael Ramir C. For more information, please visit wiwrite.org/podcast. Thank you.